Hello, everybody. Thank you and welcome to another sessions of Education for a Better World. Today, I have a dear guest, one of my colleagues, Dr. Cliff Lewis, that has joined us in this segment. I am delighted to have you here, Cliff. Welcome.
Hi, Abdi. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I know that the audience is going to enjoy getting to know you and your perspective and contribution to education and the world as a whole. So maybe we can start off asking you to tell us about you. Where were you born? How your journey has gotten you to this point?
Well, how much time do you have? Because it's been a journey.
Wow, how much
so,
is it?
okay, fantastic. Well, I am a South African. The accent is a bit funny because I've been all over the world, but I am a South African, born and raised here. I'm currently in South Africa. My journey has taken me all over the world. I am a licensed IO psychologist. And so I did my undergrad, my master's studies here in South Africa. And then I had an opportunity to study abroad, and I did my PhD in the UK. And then my work took me to the Middle East, where I lived and worked in Dubai for a while. Then I came back to South Africa, and I was working in social development. And then I worked in mining for a while. For an Australian company. And now I am my own boss, which is the worst kind of boss there is, because the hours are ridiculous. But I'm very happy to be able to work remotely from the town where I actually grew up in, Malmesbury. It's close to Cape Town. And I now work as an independent consultant. As I mentioned, I have my undergrad and my master's is in industrial psychology, IO psychology, and my PhD is in business management. And I'm currently finishing up a master's in law. So it's my education, my profession is a bit of a Frankenstein situation, a bunch of different things all put together. But I love the diversity and the variety and the projects that allows me to engage in. And that's me in a nutshell, really.
All right, very well. Thank you for sharing that with us. Actually, you have taken a unique journey on being interested in a number of different areas, taking different education path, and you are an educator yourself. So
yes,
maybe you can put some light in why were you interested to teach and become an educator? Sure.
Well, it's kind of there's kind of a few factors. So I think it's part of my makeup. I come from a family of educators. Both my parents are educators. They also have a very diverse career trajectories. My mother started out as an educator, and then she was an entrepreneur for pretty much my entire childhood. And now she's finding herself, now that she's semi-retired, she's finding herself in education again. My dad, similarly, he was in higher education earlier on in his career. And then he worked in agriculture for a while as an engineer. And then towards the end, he's retired now. Towards the end, he was working in, what do you call it? The criminal justice system, correctional services. He was working in correctional services in rehabilitation, specifically as an educator. So I've always been surrounded by education. And when I was fresh out of university and I was looking for a job, you kind of, if you don't have a lot of experience, you kind of take what you get, right? But I was quite fortunate to get a pretty, I think compared to my peers at the time, a pretty high profile. It was a management role, which most people don't get at that point. And it was in training and development. And so I found myself from an environment of educators, my parents, even some of my aunts and uncles as well. And then in that role, I was working in retail, in adult education, so management training and these types of things, vocational training. And then when I when I did my PhD in the UK, my focus areas were leadership and diversity and inclusion. And while I was studying my PhD in the UK, I was working as a teaching assistant, which all of us do when you're in that position. And I was teaching diversity and inclusion. And so it all started to come together for me. And I really started getting, education wasn't kind of just where I found myself, but an aspect of my career that I was getting really serious into, and specifically also the diversity and inclusion aspect of training. So both in content, so teaching diversity and inclusion, but also considering diversity and inclusion as a factor for planning education, for delivering education, for managing education. Because in today's world, if you don't have access to education, you're left behind. Even more, I mean, it's always been the case, but it's even more so now, specifically because, and some people might disagree with me, some people think that we're still living in the knowledge era or in a knowledge age. I think we're now in the post-knowledge age where you have access to all information at your fingertips, provided that you're in a country with, you know, certain infrastructure and certain resources. I'm not talking about severely impoverished communities, but in generally in the West, where I do most of my work, if you want to know something, you can just Google it, or you can go on a specialist site. There's free courses. And so where the diversity and inclusion aspect comes in is, now that we're in a post-knowledge age, we should be able to discern between good knowledge and maybe not so good knowledge, and not just knowledge itself, but the application of that knowledge. And that's where the real power is, and that's where the real value is. And I see so often that certain marginalized communities don't have that. You get a whole bunch of fly-by-nights, and even schools that maybe aren't so well equipped, just focusing on content. And these marginalized communities just stay behind because the critical thought isn't developed, the ability to discern between good and not so good information isn't taught. And that leaves certain communities open to various kinds of influence, inability to access other resources. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. I don't even remember what your original question was.
Well, actually, it brings it in, you know, I mean, you talk about consulting and, you know, Pro Education Group, we have a consulting firm in education, and that's what I do with my colleagues. And,
yeah,
you know, when you say consultant and you say teachers, you know, there's a lot of overlap, right? Because
yeah,
that really is the role of many teachers today, and that, I think, it continues on what you were talking about today. Knowing how to use an application of knowledge, it may be even more important than just the knowledge by itself, to identify the appropriate knowledge that you need for what your objective is, and then learn how to, you know, use it in a way that gets you your desired results. So having said that, for many of our visitors that are teachers and educators, what would you suggest that they can do, or what are some of the practices or habits that could increase their effectiveness in developing and nurturing their students?
definitely two things. So one, critical, oh dear, did I press something wrong? No, okay, everything is fine. So critical thought, definitely 100% critical thought. If we look at something that's very, very current at the moment, is COVID-19 vaccination. And there's a lot of debate around that. And one big thing that came out is of the debate and a lot of friction that happens is people who have access to the information regarding, say, what's inside a vaccine, right? The ingredients, but they don't necessarily have the understanding of how those ingredients function and how that interacts with other medication or other illnesses or any other kind of interactions. And that has a massive impact because people now make decisions about their lives and about their families, and even about employment related to what they perceive to be knowledge of vaccination or medicine or medical ingredients or pharmaceuticals. Whereas if you had a bit more, and I don't want to sound condescending, but critical thought, you might be able to say, okay, cool, I can look up what the ingredients of a vaccine is, but I don't necessarily know how that's going to interact and how that's going to affect my health. I need to speak to someone who does, or if I want to make the decision myself, I need to make sure that I understand how all of these things interact. So critical thought, definitely. If we look at politics, there's so much currently happening in the world as far as politics are concerned, and people keep on fighting with each other, and conversations keeps going in around and around and around, and people keep on having the same conversations and fighting about the same stuff. Whereas I think if education was more based on critical thought, people would be able to discern between, okay, are we actually fighting about the same thing? Are we actually having an argument about the same thing? Or are you talking about something that you think is important and I'm talking about something that I'm thinking important, and at the end of the day, we're not resolving the issue at all? So critical thought, definitely. And then the other one is social awareness. Education doesn't take place in a vacuum. Education takes place within communities, within countries, within the global a global community, and our education inevitably shapes the people who operate within these communities and in society. And so education, I think, has a moral obligation to make sure that whatever we're teaching to make people better parts of these networks and communities and better global citizens. So I think that's it. So in sum, really, my biggest critique is that education, even though there's many years of research saying that we cannot, in modern education, only focus on content. We have to look at how stuff is delivered. Oh, stuff. Bad word to use in an education podcast, but how courses are taught, and how that links up with how people function in society. We have to look at these things as well. So like meta education. Those would be my comments.
Okay. Now, obviously application of knowledge and what we want to do with the knowledge. If the more clear we are on that, I think people can be more successful. On the other hand, especially in higher education, many people are studying, and they want to obviously enter the workforce, right? And there has been obviously some gaps between what institutions prepare the graduates and what employers are requiring of the graduates getting in. And so what are some of the things that institutions can do or faculties can do in helping to close those gaps?
Yeah.
Any ideas there that you want to share with our audience?
I mean, that's an ongoing issue that I remember being an issue when I was an undergrad. I was what people would maybe refer to as a keener, being really keen to participate in everything on campus. And so when I was an undergrad, I was the chairman of the Industrial Psychology Society, and one of my portfolios was company visits. And that was specifically to address that issue of application and the gap between theory and industry. And so we would take students to company visits. Someone from the company would, chat to them, and they would exchange ideas about how what they've learned could be maybe applied within that company or whatever the case might be. and it's still an issue. And I think there are several ways in which educational institutions can address that. One is to engage industry on an ongoing basis and being very deliberate in that, whether that be by having forums like many forum, where current issues are discussed and gaps are identified, and then that being translated into learning or teaching methodology. Maybe the way the knowledge is there, but the way it's being taught doesn't really translate into industry. So engaging industry, staying on top of trends, being learner focused, being sensitive to learner needs. So what do they want to achieve? So maybe being less directive. I often see in the prospectus of institutions where they say you can have these careers, but I've yet to see educational institutions asking their students, well, what do you want to do? You know, why are you taking this course? Are you taking some courses are more obvious. I mean, if you're taking a specific law module, you're probably going to want to be a lawyer one day, but that's not that. A very select few courses are like that. Some are more transferable. So yeah, so I would say being more deliberate in engaging industry, staying on top of trends, especially now. The world has changed. Like a year in the last 2-3 years has been the amount of change that you saw like in 5 or 10 years, about like a decade ago. So you really have to be deliberate and stay on top of these things.
So what is your thoughts about internship, for example? I mean, kids that are in school, there are opportunities that they can score, or at the same time, institution can create these opportunity for their students. Do you see that as an important offering or factors or valuable in giving insight to the students while they're in the school as how to prepare their studies and themselves for the next stage in the workforce?
100%. I think internships are a crucial part of the development journey. In South Africa, we've started a new, I mean, I say we, but it wasn't me. It was government and civil society. It's called the Yes Initiative, Youth Education Service, I think it's for. So basically what it is organizations are incentivized. They can get certain compliance points and rebates if they appoint a certain amount of interns within a financial year. And then if they subsequently permanently employ some of those interns, they even get, so I think these are great, and I think they're very important. Myself, as a licensed psychologist, I have to complete an internship that's under the supervision of a registered psychologist before I can register. And from there, it was obviously a very structured internship because it has to cover certain things. But from there, I can, from my personal experience, say that it was absolutely invaluable. It's just not the same as sitting in a classroom. And learning about psychometrics and actually having to do psychometrics and give feedback to a client and advise on whether or not you're going to apply is a completely different ballgame. So I think it's very important. I think that's also an area where educational institutions can be more deliberate in engaging industry and making it part of the course. As you have to take certain amount of subjects, you have to complete an internship to finish your course, and that can serve as a feedback loop as well. So it's not just for the interns to learn, but the university can learn from it as well in terms of where the gaps are and what they're teaching and how it's applied in industry. I also have very strong opinions about how certain internships are managed in industry. I so often see companies saying, oh yeah, we have an internship, but then the person just makes coffee the whole time and they don't get paid. And I feel very strongly about that. If you have someone that gives of their time, you have to pay them, even if it's internships, otherwise it's slave labor. And if you're not paying a person a decent salary, then the trade-off has to be that they have to learn something. So if you're an organization who is running an internship, you have a moral obligation to make sure that you have specific learning outcomes. What am I going to teach this person? What are they going to get from this? Because you're not really doing them a favor unless, or you're not really doing what you're supposed to be doing in terms of an internship if you don't make sure that you're very deliberate and you teach specific things and you're able to say, okay, I was successful here. I taught this person these things, or maybe I should do better.
Well, I mean, to your point, internship, it should be more than just a slogan. It should be something that is developed jointly by the institutions as well as the given company that is looking to accept interns. So there should be parameters and should be involvement from both the educational institution and the company, and a mechanism to give feedback to the intern as how they are progressing. So it's really a full circle, and it can be a
100%.
win-win situation where
100%.
the institutions can get that feedback from industry that it really needs in order to become more effective. The company at the same time will have better qualified employees in the future that they can bring on board. And it obviously is the best scenario for a given students that is going through this journey that is expensive and is getting more expensive every day. Is taking some of the best years of their life, and it makes it more applicable to what they want to do. So they don't graduate and go to work and then find out that what they have learned is not exactly what is the employer's requirement is. So
exactly,
I agree with you. If you don't have a well thought of internship and structure it in a way that can create that win-win situation, it may become more of a busy work and not as effective. So follow up on that question. I know you and I have worked and talked, offline about mentorship, and I know you, yourself have had people that have made a huge impact in your life while you were going through your journey. How important mentorship is, and how do you maintain these mentors in your professional life?
Mentorship is incredibly important. I wouldn't be, not that I'm like world famous or super rich or anything, but I'm fairly successful, and I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for specific individuals that I can actually name. And I think it's a bit of a paying it forward situation. If you feel grateful for all the opportunities that you've received and all the learning that you've had in your life and the access to education that you've had, then I think it's kind of your responsibility to pay that forward. And I've done it from my side, not to toot my own horn, but I have junior employees who's maybe reported to me, or previous students who I taught before, who I still have contact with. There's a young lady in the UK who I mentored when she was doing her master's degree, and she's a lecturer now with a PhD, and that's really fulfilling. I have someone who reported to me more recently in industry when I was a head of department, and she's gone on. We both left the company that we were at the time, but she's gone on to do amazing things, and she still reaches out to me every now and then and asks my opinion, and it's really for me, it's really fulfilling. But I also think mentorship fills a very specific gap in education, because even if you are deliberate in engaging industry and you stay on top of trends, the rate at which things change in the world will make that there will result in an inevitable knowledge gap. There will always be a knowledge gap. So I think mentorship is also a very good form of knowledge management, where people with a lot of experience and knowledge that you can't find in a textbook because it's too rich, it's too unique, it's too person specific. Mentorship then fulfills that role of making sure that that knowledge doesn't go away with that person. It's distributed, it's disseminated, and then obviously it has the value of impacting people's individual lives. So mentoring is incredibly important, I think.
No, I appreciate that feedback, and I can tell you from my experience, it has been great for me to have mentors throughout my life and career, and I do have great mentors today that they help me to keep up with what is happening in the direction that I want to have in my life. And at the same time, when you are in position where you can mentor others, I think it's a great fulfilling legacy for each individual. So it is wonderful. And I think it's a great tool, as you mentioned, to engage and make available to the students and institutions as a whole. And it should be part of any educational providers, I believe.
Yeah,
So
no, for sure.
now, what I want to ask you, because you have had family that comes from education, both your mom and dad, and now you. And well, I've been blessed to get involved in education, and I have always enjoyed having great educators like yourself that I have worked with. Uh, but this is a good opportunity. There are a lot of people that are watching us that maybe right now they are thinking about what is a career they want to think about. First and foremost, let's start off with education. What message do you have for people that should consider education as a pathway for them as a possible career?
Well, I can only speak on my own experience. I can say that education is definitely a very rewarding area of expertise or industry to work in. But if you want to be a good educator and you don't just want to be someone who punches the clock, you're going to have to be willing to be open to new experiences, to continuously improve yourself. If you're in a regulated industry, like I'm a licensed psychologist, we have the various boards that I'm registered with require that you do a certain amount of continuing professional development. You're an engineer, I believe, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And so most engineering, as you know, most engineering boards require that as well. Lawyers, doctors. As far as I know, in South Africa and in the UK, don't require that of educators. But if you want to be a really good educator, you're going to have to take that on by yourself. There's no one that's going to stand behind you and say, you can't maintain your teacher license if you don't do. So you have to be able to do that by yourself, and you have to be willing to do that by yourself. The money isn't that great. That's why I only do it as part of my work, especially when you're starting out in education. It's not like, candidate lawyers or engineers or whatever. Psychologists don't get paid a lot. So, I mean, I'm in the same boat there, but that might be discouraging. But if you really want to make a difference, if you really want to impact lives, then I would ask of you to hold on tight and to persevere and to not be discouraged by maybe early career remuneration, and just be willing to take chances and to take chances on people. That's what I would recommend.
Thank you for that. One thing I would add, if I may, is we do need great teachers. You have been impacted by a number of great teachers that had believed in you more than even you did in yourself. That's why you have been such a successful person. I know I owe many things, and I haven't done much, but whatever I have accomplished, a number of teachers that really gave me that belief and encouragement And I think teachers are wonderful, and they can make a huge impact in the world, but it does require the passion for it.
Mm,
Not only the education and knowledge, and you very well said, a good teacher is a good student always. So if
mm,
you have that thirst for knowledge and interest for learning more and bettering yourself, then you can help others to better themselves. And I
yeah,
think being able to do that passionately, it's very rewarding because you see how you are making impact on people's life, and it is something that I encourage for people to consider, because we do need the future belongs to the youth, and youth require the very best coaches and educators that can help them develop to those challenges.
for
Now,
sure.
beside education, you mentioned about ever-changing world, right? I mean, we are seeing
Mhm.
things change in front of us in an incredible speed. So let's talk about some of the areas other than education that are really great fields for individuals that are studying to consider, that may or may not be aware of,
Mm.
and at the same time for institutions to consider offering those programs and opportunities to their
Mm.
students. Can you think of a
Sure.
few and
Mm.
share that with our audience?
So entrepreneurship is a big one, and not just entrepreneurship. I had entrepreneurship when I was at uni as I was an undergrad. Not just how to do a business plan and what's a balance sheet and all of this nonsense, like really concrete, like how to register a company, how to decide on your name, what is your strategy, what is your um, how to attract the talent that you require for your business. So real entrepreneurship. We need more smaller businesses. If I take it back to my original point about diversity and inclusion, the less money that's going into a massive corporate's bank account, and the more money that's going into smaller businesses and startups, the better. The better society will be off globally. So entrepreneurship is big, especially tech startup. There's a lot of things happening in tech. I don't think there can be enough tech development. So definitely technology. I'm not going to speak to that because I'm not an engineer or anything like that. So definitely entrepreneurship and tech. And then there's a lot of really exciting stuff happening in agriculture. So I'm not an agri person myself, but I've seen a whole bunch of stuff like growing food in like bubbles underneath the ocean, where so it removes the need for pesticides, because obviously there's no bugs under the ocean, and you don't have to manually water it, so you don't need irrigation systems or anything like that, because the way it works is the water, so it's like in a bubble, and there's air, and then the plants, and then the ocean water here at the bottom, and then I think it's because of the heat or something, the water evaporates at the top and then condensates, and then that irrigates the plant. And because it evaporates and condensates, it's not ocean, it's not salt water anymore, it's fresh water. So that vertical farms that uses a lot of technology and grows stuff vertically, so it takes up less space. So yeah, there's a lot of really interesting stuff happening in agriculture, and for all of this, I would say that it's very important to be socially conscious. Again, I probably sound like a broken record by now, but we can't afford now to just look at how much money my company can make, or how much money my new farm under the sea is going to make. I have to look at what the social impact is going to be, because otherwise, I mean, look at what's happened in Australia recently with the wildfires. It feels like every day you turn on the news and there's a new natural disaster in the Americas. I don't know why they get so many typhoons and tornadoes and stuff, we don't get them in South Africa. I don't know if we're really lucky, but it seems like all the natural disasters happen in the United States. But yeah, these things are going to keep on happening because of climate change. And so we have to be socially aware in whatever we do. So social awareness, entrepreneurship, agriculture, tech, I think these are really exciting fields to be in at the moment.
No, thank you very much for sharing that with our audience. I know I've been talking to different people, healthcare, space, but all of these, that when you look at what you mentioned, is technology plays a great role in everything we are doing. All these new areas. One thing you mentioned about the small businesses, many people may not know that actually more than 70% of the US economy comes from the small businesses. We have big names that are on the words, are very popular and recognizable, but the overall, economy of the US really depends on the small business. So your advice about entrepreneurship, and entrepreneurship in a really
real way,
that we can now, especially if some people are considering to get involved with entrepreneurship, not only they can do well for themselves, but they can do well for others within the community.
Exactly.
And I think that's important. They can take care of the community. They're creating more jobs. But if they do it consciously, they can take care of the planet and not abuse it, and really work on areas that can really help many things, such as agriculture that you mentioned, energy. We have always been dependent on energy. Most of the advancement that humans have experienced had depended on the usage of energy. But now, if we can use green energy, we can use more renewable energy, that will help not only to spare the economy, but it saves the planet as well. So I can tell you, this has been a wonderful, wonderful session. I have enjoyed having you as a guest. But before we go, any last word for our audience or something you want to share with us?
Just stick with it. As someone who seems to be never stop being a learner himself, I can tell you that sometimes you want to give up. I haven't written an exam in the last 10 years, and for some reason I thought that it would be a good thing to enroll in another degree program. And I've had instances where I go, oh, why am I doing this? I really don't need to do this, but just stick with it. Stay open to new experiences, reach out. Get yourself a mentor if you are in a privileged position that you are able to mentor someone, mentor other people. Education institutions, engage with industry. Contact me if you want to know how to be a better educational institution. And yeah, just keep on doing the good work, because without education, I can't imagine a world without it.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Clif Lewis. It was delightful to have you in our show, and wish you well, and look forward to inviting you in future sessions. But thank you so much. Keep up the great work.
Look forward to it. Thanks, Abdi. Bye-bye.